Okay, Gaurav.
Sure. So, good afternoon to our friends in India. I am right now in Silicon Valley, California. So, midnight for me. And to our audience, wherever you are, warm welcome. This panel is primarily focused on what India has to offer when it comes to technology and innovation. And I think Bangalore and Karnataka happens to be the key technology innovation center. And two of the panelists which we have been part of this integral part of this journey of Bangalore becoming not only a leading technology and innovation hub of India, but also being a technology center across the world. So I will start with some probing questions, both from Kiran and Mohan, starting with Kiran. Kiran Mazumdar Shah needs no introduction. She has been at the forefront of technological innovation when it comes to biotechnology. He's a well-known person who speaks openly on the topics of technology and what are the other geopolitical and socioeconomic factors which impact these issues. So I'll start with you, Kiran. In your opinion, how do you think Bangalore developed this innovative community, what it has today? What were some factors? Because you have been involved in like close to now 40 years. And what was Bangalore then? What Bangalore is now? Would you please elaborate a little bit?
So let me start by saying that Bangalore has always had a spirit of inquiry, a very strong science focus, a very strong engineering focus. And I know that over the last several decades of my sort of life's journey, I know that we were always proud of the fact that we were the science capital of the country, and we continue to be that. In addition to that, I think there was a huge focus on being experimental, on querying. So, we have got, this spirit of inquiry from the Nobel laureate C.V. Raman's time, And in addition to that, of course, we've had this wonderful institution of the Indian Institute of Science, where I think the scientific excellence that we have seen during its formative years laid the kind of bedrock of science and technology for the country out of Bangalore. As you know, ISRO also had a very strong presence in Bangalore, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, was added, the National Center for Biological Sciences and many more. And of course, you had the likes of many CNS Raos and many other people who actually have been global figures when it comes to science, technology, and the spirit of inquiry. When you look at all these names that I just mentioned, they always have encouraged us to think out of the box, to innovate, to try and basically do things in a differentiated way. And one of the great achievements that Bangalore has had is that all of us who started our entrepreneurial journeys are not only first generation entrepreneurs, but we actually took a big risk in an untrodden way, on an untrodden path, whether it was information technology by the likes of the founders of Infosys, or in my case, in biotechnology. I think all of us were willing to take that risk. And that's the first important aspect of a city that innovates. If you are a risk taker, if you want to, sort of basically challenge the status quo, and you want to basically, think out of the box and do things differently, that sets a very strong foundation for innovation, which I think Bangalore has very successfully done. Added to that was a government that believed that these tech sectors were going to drive the future of the state and the economy. With that kind of focus, where you had a very strong public-private partnership when it came to policies in building this ecosystem, I think we have a very unique model of vision groups headed by private sector leaders, and then also participated in by academia, industry, and the government. And this has created a very unique trust model. The trust model that we have created through vision groups allows us to come out with far-reaching policies, which the government then implements so that it basically adds to the ecosystem. So whether it was the first IT policy, the first biotech policy, the first EV policy, the first startup policy for the country, I think Bengaluru has actually taken the lead. And, the beauty is that the state government also was very keen to play a leadership role in all these areas. So even if you think about electric vehicles, it was a Bangalore-based entrepreneur, Sandeep Maini, who actually took the lead. Chetan Maini, who took the lead in basically coming out with the first EV project in the country, which he, of course, later on divested to Mahindra's. So you've seen the kind of risks we've taken, RK. And I think the fact that we have 400 R&D centers in Bengaluru today of various global companies is a sort of testimony to that great talent pool that we have, that great, that innovative spirit that we have, and the fact that we are actually delivering very high-end innovation for global kind of needs. So, the fact that we also now have, some of the largest number of tech unicorns coming out of Bengaluru is again a testimony to that. Because these are people who are willing to think out of the box and come up with very new business models, all sort of tech-led. So that, to answer in a nutshell, is the reason why Bengaluru enjoys the status of being amongst the top 25 global tech hubs in the world.
So starting, I think you mentioned about these techpreneurs and the unicorns, and that's where I think a much bigger impact, I think, because the people who have taken the risk and made their money are also the people who are willing to take more risk by putting their money into the new, ventures, whether it is through they themselves becoming venture capital, part of the VC firms, or like Mohan, who has essentially, after being Infosys CFO and having done several other stints, now is focused on venture capital, and he is running private equity and venture capital funds. So my question to you, Mohan, of course, it's obvious you are with Infosys, you are a true blue Bangalorean, but let's think of hypothetical situation if you had to set up your RN capital or 314, not in Bangalore, maybe some other city, of India, for example. What would have been, what were the decision-making, parameters which you took when you decided, and what challenges you would have faced if it was not Bangalore?
Well, RK, I think the most important thing is availability of science and R&D institutions in a place, because that is where research takes place. That's where new ideas come, possibly critical mass of researchers. Without that, it will be a blank landscape. Second, availability of human capital in the form of educational institutions, because educational institutions provide the raw material for technology companies. You need innovators, you need technocrats to execute that. And third will be a good quality of life, so that people from outside the city are willing to emigrate and make it a bigger national or a global hub. And then comes good government policies to make all this happen. For example, you look at Bangalore, look at Calcutta. Calcutta in the 50s and 60s had many more research institutions, much more critical human capital, education, everything. But bad government policy ruined that, right? And quality of life came down dramatically. Whereas in Bangalore, the establishment of all these institutions, like Kiran said long ago, and then the public sector, big firms coming here in technology and engineering in the 50s, then their children getting educated in the engineering colleges, getting a critical mass of human capital and a high quality of life, all that came together to make what it is. So I would pick things in that order if I have to go elsewhere, because for venture capital and for private equity, you need deals. Deal sourcing is the biggest thing. And you have to be in the place where deals are sourced. And for deal sourcing, you need a critical mass of innovation, innovators, and engineers. And all that has to be available in multiple areas. Right now, India is available in Bangalore, plenty, in Gurgaon, in certain areas, in Mumbai, partially because of Pune, and Hyderabad and Chennai came way behind. And Calcutta, the original hotspot, almost nothing. It's like a barren desert. So I think these are the things that have to come up. And I think Karnataka is now at an inflection point. We need to do something dramatic to take it up from here, because we have all this in abundance, but there are some things that we need to invest in.
Good, Mons. I think you gave a very pertinent and very, I would say, practical example of how a city which was a leader in maybe post-independence, even till 60s and 70s, in Calcutta, and because of the maybe bad policies and other aspects, it just lagged behind. Now, I think, Kiran, you alluded to this, that Bangalore had all these institutions which helped. Of course, biotechnology, you were the pioneer, you started. But can you elaborate a little bit the role of this public sector units which created the environment of R&D? You mentioned about ISRO and several others. What role the government institutions, the research institutions, including the educational institutions like IISc played, and what exactly that led to biotech, IT services, and was it just the manpower or the temperament of scientific thinking and that inquiry-based thinking?
So, RK, if you think back on how Bengaluru has evolved over decades since independence, I think, when you look at how the central government thought about allocating different public sector companies to different parts of the country, you could very well see that Bengaluru was chosen for its engineering and scientific talent pool. So, whether you think about BEL or HMT or any of those kind of premier public sector undertakings at that time, Bengaluru was chosen as the city that would actually support such a public sector undertaking with the engineering talent requirement that it had. ISRO was another example of saying, hey, we need these, and the National Aeronautical Institute and things like that. They were all located in Bengaluru, again, because that was the sourcing of talent that you required to run these kind of institutes. So that was basically what built up Bengaluru's kind of talent pool over the years. And then, of course, because of this, it had a kind of a self-perpetuating effect on engineering colleges. And you had 200 engineering colleges all coming up within the kind of greater Bengaluru area, which all supplied more and more and more IT talent. So, that also became a sort of a early enabler of the IT sector. And then, of course, we were very fortunate that when Infosys decided to start its business, obviously, Bengaluru was chosen because, of Mr. Narayan Murthy, who decided to start it in Bengaluru. He could have done it in Pune, but he decided to do it in Bengaluru. And I think that was the starting point.
I believe initially it was thought of in Pune or Mumbai or somewhere, and then it was moved to Bangalore.
Yeah. So I think that was really what started off the whole IT ecosystem here. Of course, then when Wipro got into IT, obviously Bengaluru was the chosen city and so on and so forth. And so the critical mass of IT talent, willy-nilly grew in Bengaluru. Today, as Mohan loves to say, in the next 1 or 2 years, we will overtake Silicon Valley where you are based in terms of the number of software engineers we will have in one single city of over 2 million software engineers. I mean, I think that is amazing. And the world, which has now been plunged into a digital world where every organization is talking about digital transformation, just needs talent. Where are all these software engineers going to come from? The world needs millions of software engineers. I think India is going to be a great reservoir of software engineering talent. And I think Bengaluru is going to be the most sought after talent pool when it comes to software engineers. And I hope that instead of people leaving Bengaluru, I hope companies come to Bengaluru and tap this human resource from where we are. Because what we need to do now is to create a true Silicon Valley with the best of infrastructure, which we lack today. So when you talk about quality of life, if you only improve the quality of life, I don't think anyone will want to move out of Bengaluru to any other part of the world. Today, of course, the infrastructure is abysmal for a city that can brag about such rich global talent, such interesting and innovative companies. And the fact that it's all happening right here in a strained infrastructure city is something that we all have to think about. But another point I also want to mention, and I think Mohan should answer this question, is that when you want to grow these global hubs, access to capital and policies that support startups have to be conducive to growth. Today, I feel that's another big opportunity for the country to really address very urgently. I know that, we keep raising this issue to the policymakers time and time again, but I just feel we are moving at glacial speed. We're just not realizing the huge potential that we have created right here out of Bengaluru. But you ask any of these unicorns, ask any of these young aspiring tech entrepreneurs, what is it that keeps them behind, or what is it that they need to really unleash their full potential? And the answer is going to be access to capital. I think we do need to urgently address this. And I think Carnegie will do a human service to the startup economy if we really put pressure on policymakers to really, make it easier for young startups to access capital, and for the investors, the VC investors, to invest in these sectors unhindered. Because today, we also know there's a lot of flight of, these startups to the more conducive, policy countries in the world, like Singapore and US and other parts of the world, where they know what it means to have a very rich startup ecosystem. We have it and we don't know the value of this. That's my point.
So I think that's very important point. And Mohan, I think, Kiran touched a very important, and given that this tech summit is about the bridge between technology and policy. And as our foreign minister in his inaugural mentioned that there was in the very first summit 5 years ago, and he remembered that we discussed about bridging the gap between Delhi and Bangalore, how Delhi thinks and how Bangalore acts. We need to bring it together. And that time he mentioned there is not much difference. But today he said, I would like to qualify that statement, that there is a difference, but difference is of different nature. And then he tried to elaborate more on it. And I think this is a very important point. And I know for a fact, being an entrepreneur and investor, a lot of our companies, even now, and I know you've been working very hard through SEBI and so many other institutions. First, access to capital. Then second, exit from exit routes through public listing, and then what are the consequences of that in terms of the taxation and things like that, and because of which companies prefer to base themselves out of India, many times in Singapore or other place. Could you elaborate, I think, for the audience, and I'm sure policymakers also will like to hear this, what is already being done and what needs to be done to make sure that India becomes the preferred place for setting up, not only just having the body, but also the head in India? Because many times startups have the head in Singapore and bodies in India. How do we do it, and what are the challenges?
Okay, I would suggest a 5-point program. I hope Amitabh Kant and everybody in Delhi are listening. Delhi is not habitable because of bad air. So let's be clear. Because I read reports that if you live in Delhi, you lose 9 years of your life. And I'm sure everybody wants to live long, and they're all going to Goa, coming to Bangalore, hopefully. I've seen my friends from Delhi come to Bangalore. 5 things. First, we need to have a high-tech vision for Bangalore. We have to invest in the top of the pyramid. Now, Kiran is doing a lot of R&D. There are a lot of R&D happening in our university, but we need a fund for R&D. We need to identify 10 areas of high technology like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, space research, in let us say quantum computing, and in the metaverse, etc. 10 areas. And I've been asking Nivruti and Kiran to write a paper on that. What should be that? Create a policy and create a kitty of 500,000 crores from the state government to invest in research and to fund startups in those areas. So we create a high-tech, very high-tech area which grows over a period of time and pulls up the whole system to become the innovation center of the world. It's not expensive, it can be done. And possibly we can have Chris Gopalkrishnan, who has put big money into investment to lead this from the Vision Group, with Kiran also, so that it can work. And Prashant, these 3 people are extraordinary people. The second thing we need to do very, very clearly is we have to set up new places near the airport so that we get new investment coming in an area which is very conducive to high quality living to make a global city. Now, let me explain. We need to attract global talent, Kiran. So let us say we invite, PNC Menon from Dubai, who has created Shobha Heartland, which is very wonderful. If you go there, is in paradise, to create a city with space for companies and space for people to stay, with schools and everything else in 500 acres, and call 2 or 3 other people so that near the airport, we can create something new in 2 years. But globally, people can start coming. They don't have to go to the city. That is something for the new thing. The third thing, what we have to do very well is we have to do the kind of things to decongest Bangalore. Take up the metro to 250 kilometers is on the track, but they have to fund it properly. Create those 10, 11 high-speed corridors to make sure that traffic moves, and do it ruthlessly in a short period of time, for the quality of life for every Bangalorean gets a dramatic improvement, and make the core of Bangalore a walking city. So the quality of life goes up. Then the fourth thing what we have to do is the government has to actively pursue global firms who are in the high-tech area to come here. See, we have not had success. We had Invest Karnataka, which we are all a part. It didn't work because sabotage from within. We need a minister full-time to work with somebody like Invest Karnataka to target high-tech firms, to ask them to come here. For example, today, 75,000 crore PLI is being approved by the cabinet for semiconductor chip design. Now, can you get a fab to Bangalore? It'll be difficult. We don't have water, maybe. But can we get more designers? We are the design center of the world, 250,000 software chip testers and designers in Bangalore. So what can we do in terms of chip packaging and all the other things that can be done? I think we need to work on that and make it happen. What can we do to make Bangalore the EV capital of India? We wrote the EV policy 4 years ago. Nothing has happened. We need urgency in that thing. And the next thing, which is very important, which Kiran keeps talking about, is the higher quality of life. How can we create more museums for our children? A technology museum, a space museum, natural museum, natural history museum. How can we create, cultural activities in the city so that more people understand how to make it a global city? Then how can we make sure that we create the involvement of citizens of Bangalore in the growth of the city by reforming the city and creating a new architecture for governance. So the more and more people get involved. And how do we also make sure that, we are able to become truly global in as much as we get maybe 500,000 people from all over the world coming and staying here and interacting with everybody in an atmosphere? How do you change the tax laws to make sure more Indian capital flows into venture? You mentioned about exits. Look at the IPOs that have happened. But 12, 13 IPOs happened, is done well, except when there's overpricing. Another 12, 13 are coming. So we cracked the IPO problem. I mean, it's always there, but people didn't venture for whatever reason. Now we got to crack the tax problem. Very small amendment will make sure that Indians invest more. If we're able to do this 5-point program, out of which 80-90% is within the state government's purview, and maybe 10-15% is something that our finance minister, who's the MP from Karnataka, incidentally, you must know that, will be able to do in parliament, and then invite Prime Minister Modi to release that high-tech vision and to promise us that he's going to put the might of the central government behind this high-tech vision, because it can only happen in Bangalore. And if Bangalore does that, it'll pull up the whole country, because it can't happen anywhere else. It has to happen in Bangalore in the shortest period of time. Everything is here. If we're able to do this 5-point program the next 2 or 3 years, 2025 will be very different, RK. But it has to be done by focus. Maybe get RK Mishra to program manage this with authority.
And RK, if I may add to it, I think, as Mohan said, Bengaluru is the only city of the future that, that India can really brag about, because we've actually created the basic building blocks of a world-class city. If our infrastructure was world-class, believe me, we would have been flying by now. Today, that's what is dragging us down. Everything else is world-class talent, okay? We've got world-class capabilities. We're second to none when it comes to research and innovation. We have great institutions. We have great research focuses. We have great incubators. We have great we've even created an ecosystem of investment. So I think we've got all the basic ingredients of world-class cities, except its infrastructure. And I think I would really like to keep emphasizing this point, because I think the political will has to be there to recognize it and invest in it. Unfortunately, the political preference is for saying Bangalore can look after itself. We need to do more in the rest of the state. But I think that's making a big mistake, because you have to invest in Bengaluru, because it is the economic growth engine, not just for Karnataka, but for the country. And I think you cannot replicate Bengaluru in a short time. If you want to do it, it will take any of the other cities at least 10 to 20 years. We have basically evolved in a very natural way. And these are examples of cities around the world that have come to this kind of level. You cannot suddenly make a city that is not conducive to innovation into the most innovative city. So for instance, even in the US, you've got Boston, San Diego, and San Francisco. And even if you throw money at other cities like Dallas or any of the other rich cities, they can never emulate what these other cities represent in terms of the talent and the ecosystem. It takes a long time to build an ecosystem. As I said, Bengaluru was very fortunate that it had leading scientific research institutions. It had the kind of scientific temper, the engineering temper, and the kind of first generation risk-taking appetite. Bengaluru is a city built by first generation entrepreneurs. This has not been a city that has inherited wealth in like other cities have. That's what I think makes us different.
So Kiran, very important point, I think both of you. And again, because given that, this summit is not only about technology, but the role of technology in geopolitical and socio-economic. And I think when Carnegie started India, and most of the Carnegie centers across the world did not have the technology policy as part of their agenda. And you would remember that we said you should start with India, because for India, having a technology as a geopolitical element of our policy making was very, very crucial, and which was again today emphasized by our foreign minister, who was foreign secretary then and had been a great supporter of this. So I think, Mohan, to your 5-point technology mission, this is of strategic importance to the country.
Yeah.
From the geopolitical context, today,
Yeah.
the leadership in the world is taken by the countries and companies which have technology supremacy. And I think this point needs to be explained to the policymakers, and emphasis should be given. Bangalore is not just about so many engineers and so much employment and so many unicorns. It's about geopolitical aspect, our country's image, as well as our ability to leverage technology.
And, RK, from the geopolitical point of view, let me make this point. China may be overtaking the United States in many multiple areas of technology. China has 25% of the world's manufacturing and is not going to go away. Yeah. And China is becoming a very different country from what people thought China was. Well, the rest of the world has to come together to make sure that technology is used for peace and not for hegemony. Japan will not be able to do it on its own. The United States will not be able to do it. Europe is behind. So we have to work in collaboration with the US, Europe, and Japan to work on areas of high technology which can be used for the benefit of mankind in a way that is more egalitarian and more democratic. And in that, Bangalore becomes very good. So maybe we need a global coalition of cities, maybe Boston and the Valley, Bangalore, maybe London, and Germany's Frankfurt, along with Tokyo, which should come together and along with maybe Tel Aviv to chalk out what we need and how do we all work together. Because this will depend on three things. One will depend on what exactly is high technology and where do we work and how do we put in the R&D piece. Second will depend on capital. And third will depend on human capital, right? In all three, India is a major player, may not be as big as the United States, may not be as big as Japan, but in some areas we have great strength. And if you look to the future, Bangalore is the place which can really make a very deep change. We have the R&D centers of the major 450 or the 500 Fortune 500 companies in the world. And we have so much of cutting edge happening here. Artificial intelligence work has taken off here like nothing. And our software companies have trained 2.5 million people in the use of AI and ML. So we solved one set of problems. We have not solved the problem of creating AI algorithms, which require PhDs and others. So that's why with the government investing in high tech, with the high tech vision, an alliance with these big cities to Carnegie could be very, very good. For example, we know in the future the metaverse is going to come where virtual reality and reality could merge. That's very dangerous for all of us. We are seeing how robotics and drone technology, unmanned technology, and everything and space technology is coming together for defense to create a shield against missiles and everything else. And we also see how efforts in biotechnology to elongate human life, to tackle any of these pandemics that could come. And we don't know how the pandemic started. And there are a lot of theories about that. I don't want to go into it. And how do we protect all of us? Because it has to be a global venture. And the pandemic has demonstrated, like Kiran keeps saying, you're not safe anywhere. You can't hide between the two ponds. Think on both sides of a country, there are big ponds and nobody can come. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. So we're all in the same boat. So we have to work together and we have to think big. To me, that is geopolitics, because geopolitics is going to be technology-led, and technology domination and technology creation and innovation is going to determine future safety of the planet. And here is where we have to work together.
Good. So I think Mohan talked about pandemic, and I think no discussion is complete unless we go a little bit. And I think with what happened in pandemic and which made us realize earlier when we missed a flight got cancelled, we got really, really agitated. For almost a year, there were no flights. I mean, nothing was flying. And this was surreal. We never thought this will ever see in our lifetimes. It has happened. And it seems to be continuing to happen. which also brings to the point building the resilience. A city like Bangalore, a country like India, and I'm sure we have no one better than Kiran to talk about it. Kiran, what is something Bangalore as a tech and innovation capital, and the you being at the forefront of biotech and what's happening here? India did a great job with vaccine, but how do we build the resilience? Resilience as a city, resilience to our economy, and resilience to our society and as a country, because this kind of thing potentially could be, even if it is accidental or man-made, may repeat. Looks like it will repeat. What do we do about it, and how? What kind of role a city like Bangalore, the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Bangalore can do?
So RK, first let me start by saying that I think India has done the best job in the world when it comes to pandemic management. Mm-hmm. I really have been comparing and contrasting what every part of the world has been doing in managing this pandemic. We have leveraged digital technologies in the most efficient ways compared to any country in the world, if I may say so. Look at the way we developed. Okay, it had teething problems, but we developed Arogya Setu basically to contact, trace, and track every infected person in the early phases of the pandemic. We developed a fantastic COVID app that could actually capture all data associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, whether it was an RT-PCR test result, whether it was your vaccination dose, 1 or 2, which vaccine you took, when did you take it, where did you take it? And we had a QR code on our vaccination certificate issued online.
Yep.
We have created one of the largest databases in the world when it comes to vaccination and all the data that is related to COVID-19. Now we are basically also capturing sequencing data, okay? Because we want to know which variant is where and all this kind of stuff. What we should do is to leverage all this software and platforms that we have created. And remember, all this was available to you in a personalized way on your mobile phone.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to know whether your RT-PCR test is positive or negative, it would come on your phone.
Yeah.
Today, every single airport test that we do on arrival arrives on your mobile phone a few hours later. I don't think any country in the world has actually worked out such an elaborate, complex, and powerful database and digital system for tracking COVID-19. We have to be agnostic to COVID-19 and go beyond COVID-19 for any disease management using the same kind of platforms. That is my real recommendation to the government, saying you've done a tremendous job, but now how about leveraging this technology and getting into other diseases? Whether it's non-communicable or communicable, it's a very powerful platform. So digital health has arrived. Okay, and that is going to really transform the way the world manages and does surveillance. To be resilient, RK, you need to be in a state of preparedness. To be in a state of preparedness, you need to have surveillance. You need to be able to pick up any signs of a worrying pandemic or a worrying epidemic or a worrying disease. Even today, if you suddenly find that why is it that we're getting huge amounts of a certain type of cancer, that data has to be, shared in the form of alerts. That I'm finding that a certain type of cancer is very prevalent in this area. You then have to see what is it that's causing that kind of cancer. Many times in the world, you find that polluted waters or something else is causing cancers of a certain type. So I'm just giving that as an example. So to be resilient, you have to be prepared, and you have to have some kind of warning system that prepares you in a way that allows you to tide over something like this. And then Today, because of COVID, we've learned to swiftly come up with protocols. So for pandemic preparedness, you need to have a number of protocols that you can quickly put into place, whether it's diagnostic testing, whether it is treatments, whether it is hospital preparedness, whether it is the way you want to segregate populations in step-up kind of hospital care centers. We've learned a lot. That's how you basically get into a pandemic preparedness kind of situation. But I also believe that we should use all that we have done in COVID-19 to actually go beyond to other parts of healthcare. The next thing I want to also mention is the world is basically, unfortunately displaying knee-jerk reactions to any and every variant.
Yeah.
Why are we not collecting data? Today, the Omicron virus has scared the life out of everybody on the planet. But we don't have enough data to say, is this a harmless version of the COVID-19 virus? Is this a virus that is going to really cause death? Or is it just a mild cold-like virus? We don't have such data being shared. I think we as a country need to generate a lot of that data and share it with the world, because nobody is being transparent. In fact, it's very interesting that many parts of the world are using these variants to basically dominate in terms of restrictions, in terms of do's and don'ts. I think we need to be far more proactive and make sure that we track every one of the Omicron patients in India and see, is anyone hospitalized, or even if they're being hospitalized because of Omicron, are they serious? Has anyone got into an ICU? Has anyone got onto a ventilator? Does any of the Omicron patients require oxygen? These are questions we need to answer and share with the world. And because we have such a powerful database, I think India can actually hold a light to the world if we know all this data and how to analyze it.
Thank you, Kiran, because I'll give a simple anecdote, because right now I'm in the US, and wherever I go, many places in the US, they want to see your certificate, and they expect, in US, actually every state has a different system, and most of them is a paper-based, where you get paper from wherever you went, and it can be written by anybody, frankly speaking, but of course. So when I open my phone, they're expecting a paper from me when I show that. And it seems many people from India, so they look at the QR code, and of course, now they recognize it by the photo on the, certificate, which is our Prime Minister's. Oh, you're from India. You guys have done a great job. And this is what we hear from even the, places like restaurants and, public places where they need. So I think India, in its own way, we managed this pandemic in a manner using technology where we have got a global recognition, and I think we should be pretty proud. Now, before we have, I think, around 10, 12 minutes, and there's some questions which have come. I would like to read a few of those. Let me see. Well, Kiran, this is something for you. I'm not sure, you have an answer, but why not? How does Karnataka continue to be on the top of the Niti Aayog's innovation rankings year after year? I think, you have already answered, because Karnataka has a temperament for innovation. That's why. So I don't think there is any.
We are the biggest and the best. So what is new?
Would like to?
We are the biggest and the best.
Correct. So I
think
that's
far ahead of others.
Good. All right. So I think others have some work to do. So Karnataka doesn't need to worry, but I think Karnataka needs to keep up its lead. And we should be comparing with the Indian cities. We should be comparing with the global cities. And that's where I think the true metal. Yeah. Correct. Mohan, this is an important question. I think you should answer this. Why has the innovation roadmap provided by Karnataka and Bangalore has been really hard to replicate by other Indian states?
No, that's because, one, they don't have the vision or the critical plan to build the vision. Now tell me, which chief minister of which state will walk the talk? Chandrababu Naidu did it in Hyderabad for a few years. It worked. Have you seen anybody in Delhi do it? Anybody in, let us say, Maharashtra do it? Anybody in Tamil Nadu? Tamil Nadu is left way behind Kerala. Anybody in Andhra Pradesh now after Naidu? Anybody in West Bengal? I mean, they're all lost. You see, the problem in India is we are so diverse. We're so very different. People at the top in the political field get lost in the entire, act of governance. I just wrote an article on Prime Minister Modi's term as Chief Minister in Technology. You'll be very surprised. I discovered that he had a vision for digital Gujarat 15 years ago. And he implemented a lot of programs for digital Gujarat. And he got all the awards, 110 awards. And when he went to Delhi, he announced Digital India in 2015. RK, 2015 was a different time in history. So we need a leader with a vision. And the leader is going to implement the vision with money and with mission. And if we get both of them, it will come. See, Bangalore case is very different because serendipity and the creation and everything came together with good leadership. In places which don't have all this, you need good leadership, visionary leadership, and execution to pull it up and create that. Look at West Bengal. I've been to Calcutta multiple years. I've spoken to the chief ministers, both from the company side and from the TMC. They all agree, but nothing happens after that. Nothing happens. Calcutta will be should have been a natural magnet. They're going down and down and down. 2 generations of young people from Calcutta have left. I mean, we got 150,000 Bengali engineers in Bangalore, only 50,000 left in Calcutta, and many of them want to come here. So see, RK, you require leadership. See, Bangalore happened because set of circumstances, then leadership developed. I'm sure Kiran will agree with me. Then, the people who are involved worked with the leadership and they were receptive. Karnataka is a very different state. So we need this to happen. And unless this happens, so you need right now a push. Bangalore was a pull-up, you need a push.
And I'll be also very honest. There's a huge trust deficit between the government and the private sector in all parts of the country except Karnataka.
Correct. So, Kiran, I wanted to put that point. I mean, which chief minister will have his first meeting with the tech captains of the city, which happens only in Karnataka? And I mean, every chief minister, I mean, you and I, Mohan, we all have been witness to it. I mean, I don't remember before SM Krishna.
No, even more importantly, RK, you ask every bureaucrat,
yes,
there's a huge competition to be the IT/BT secretary.
Correct. Which is almost not.
And we've always had an excellent IT/BT secretary, including, of course, our present one, Dr. Ramana Reddy, who actually was also a former IT/BT secretary who came back for a second term, and he's an outstanding bureaucrat.
Very important point, because no other state IT/BT secretary will be a coveted post which every bureaucrat would like to be. So I think that says a lot about Karnataka and its culture. I think last question, I think this is also summarized some other questions. We are very happy what Bangalore has done, and certainly our competition and comparison has been primarily with cities of India. But what about global rankings and standing? I think we still have a long way to go. So 2 minutes to both of you, if you could quickly elaborate what we need to do, because I don't think we are still there where we potentially could be. To realize our potential, what we need to do so that we can be in the same league as, when it comes to innovation, as Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, or Shenzhen, or Berlin for that matter.
Okay, let me go first, then Kiran can wind up. RK, first in Bangalore, we need to create a document which shows what we achieved so far, so all the data is there. Bangalore has 42 or 45 unicorns. Who knows it globally? They don't even know how many unicorns are there in India. Big India has got 82 unicorns. 42 came up in the last 11 months. Who knows about it? We get a bad name because of infrastructure. You look at the New York Times, they write rubbish all the time. You look at Nikkei Asia, where you understand, some people keep on writing rubbish, they publish it. So we have to create a compendium, a document which encapsulates all the latest data about Bangalore, say, this is what we achieved. And then Kiran and others, Nivruti, should write the vision document, this is where we are going. So people know that we know our stuff, right? And third, we have to interact with the major global hubs to make sure they know what we are doing, so they feel they have to associate with us or they're going to lose out. For example, Tel Aviv is a innovation hub. I mean, they hardly know us, right? Of course, Jonathan is trying to do it, but they hardly know us. So I think all this is important and we have to do it well. So I think all these things have to be done. First, the information asymmetry has to be closed. Then the vision. We're able to do that, we can do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just believe that what Mohan said is absolutely true. I think we do need to emulate some of the best practices from other parts of the world. And I think we need to really do it seriously, because we keep pointing this out to policymakers saying, look at the way they're incentivizing startups. Look at the way they're incentivizing access to capital. Look at the way they're incentivizing venture capital. Look at the way they're incentivizing these kind of companies or anything that we talk about. We have to adopt that. We cannot ignore it. We cannot assume that it will just happen on its own. I think policymakers always believe that we are going with handouts. That they're giving handouts. It's not handouts. They have to invest. I think policymakers need to understand that nothing happens without investment. The good thing about the government of Karnataka is that it has systematically invested in creating all these opportunities. Look at the way the Karnataka government, even in the biotech sector and in the IT sector, invested in triple ITB, invested in the IBAB, the Center for Human Genetics, Science Gallery, Bengaluru. I don't think any state government has done as much as Karnataka has done for the IT, BT sectors and science and technology. Look at how many scientific institutions have been created in Bengaluru. So I think that's what has actually made us at least one of the foremost, sort of tech leaders in the country. But we need to keep looking outside to see how can we keep adopting best practices. I'm telling you, and I keep reiterating this, if our infrastructure was better, believe me, all these other contending cities which are at the moment ahead of us would be far behind us.
Good. So I think I would have not expected anything better or more from this panel, because two people who are always speaking their mind and really care for the city, for the state and for the country. You both have been at the forefront of technology innovation and making sure that this is not limited to your own companies or cities. You have been global proponent of these values and policies. And Carnegie as a platform, I think, is trying to make sure that we are in a position to have these views to share with our audience as well as the policymakers. I think in the 6th year of our this Global Technology Summit, we have achieved a lot. What we started with Kiran when we sat first time and thought about what we want to do with this. I think more needs to be done, more can be done, and we hope. Unfortunately, we have not been able to meet physically for last 2 years. Hopefully, next year will be better, and we chose Bangalore as a city to have our physical Global Tech Summit, and hopefully we'll do it in Bangalore next year. Then we can talk more about Bangalore in person. Till then, I think thank you both for sparing your time and giving your opinion frankly as ever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.